Right. So there's no way I'm editing any of that shit in, so don't worry. It's way too boring.
You can just do the bit where I said Wolf Alice was shit if you want.
Yeah, that can be a send-off.
Okay, right. Okay, hello listeners and welcome to episode 42 of the Picky Bastards podcast. I am Fran Slater and I am here with Matthew Paul, who is just done a big stretch as he always does. How are you, Matt?
I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm limber.
Bit of an in-joke that no one else will get, but you know, Matt likes stretching.
That's such an in-joke. Oh my God.
I'm also here
No, that's just going to drive people away from this podcast. Thanks, Fran. Great work.
Yeah.
Just imagine Matt stretching. That's all you need to do.
It's a good image.
I'm also here with Nicholas. I can't think. What does Nick like doing, Matt?
Being incredibly witty.
Nothing.
Being old? Yeah. Telling dad jokes?
Yeah, I don't mind that actually. I'll take that.
Yeah.
That's fine. I'll own that.
Okay, cool. Well, we're here for episode 42, which is actually going to be my last episode for a little while because I'm going on some Picky Bastards paternity leave.
He gets no benefits though. He gets nothing out of it at all. We're not paying the
What are
fucker
you
for that.
booing, Matt? Are you booing the baby? Are you booing...
The joy of new life. Boo.
Who are you booing?
All of the above.
Yeah, all of it? Okay, fair enough.
Wow.
Have amazing. A quick stretch and get over yourself. So yeah, my last one for a little while, and our editor friends will be covering for me, and I'll be making them. I'll still be choosing an album each time, so I'm going to choose really obnoxious music to make them struggle with. But anyway, on to today. Today we are listening to, as always, 4 recently released albums, 1 classic, and then I'll be telling you about an artist I love. So the recent releases are Bright Green Field by Squid, There Is No End by Tony Allen, Nurture by Porter Robinson, and For My Mama and Anyone Who Looked Like Her by McKinley Dixon. The classic this month is Perfect Angel by Minnie Riperton, and I'll be telling you all why I love John Smith. So I'm going to start with, I hope you listen to those album titles closely because I've based all my questions around them today. So I'm going to start by asking Nick, which album fit best with its title and why?
I'm happy to help out by repeating the album title in question as I answer, if that's okay with you.
Go for it.
So which album title fits best with music and why? I'm going to go with Tony Allen, There Is No End. Basically now and again, somebody comes along, a musician comes along that kind of demonstrates to me what I guess you two know already, which is that I know fuck all about music, basically. And I managed to not know that this genre, which I've heard of course, Afrobeat, is actually amazing, and I've long loved it, but not knowing that that's what it was called, which is quite embarrassing. So there's a confession for the start of the episode. It's also, not only that, but it's also very clear that I'm not the only one. There's a number of great features on this album, many great features on this album, that pretty much shows me that everyone else gets it except for me. And I should probably give up this reviewing shit right now. Right, so as well as Fran leaving today, I'm probably off basically. So
great.
It's cool. Matt can keep up conversation on his own for the next few months. So basically, this album was really, really fantastic and clever and moody, energetic, never grating. Just a really inspiring and exciting piece of work. And that's why the There Is No End thing fits for me because, as far as I'm aware, Tony Allen recently passed away. But this gives the distinct impression that his music is both enduring in the sense that it's a new album, but also the style is so fresh, there's so much to it. And also, I'm actually not just going to bring myself down with this, though. I've been slating myself quite heavily in the last 5 minutes. I'll also go Radiohead as well, because because
Do it.
Let's just go all in. Fuck it up. So because when I say that I love the drumming on King of Limbs, for example, which like with the double drumming, with Clive as well as Phil.
Yeah.
And I think to myself that they're so clever. Aren't they so clever? Yeah. Now I really realise that they're just kind of pretenders who are like lifting Afrobeat elements from their percussive stuff. So really, essentially, Tony Allen has basically destroyed my kind of fragile confidence in my musical knowledge, and at the same time killed off Radiohead as in any way inventive.
I mean, I literally think this is the weirdest.
I might have slightly overstayed the last bit. Okay.
This album also is about several years after the King of Limbs, so it's a very weird comment.
I mean,
it's fine. I was actually just thinking as well while you were answering the question to start with. I didn't really expect you to come up with good answers to these questions, and you came up with a really good answer to that question. So I was thinking, well done, Nick. That's really interesting. And then you just went mental. And just spouted loads of bollocks.
Overstating the Radiohead thing slightly. I think but Tony Allen, the existence of this album basically makes me feel like an idiot. So that's about it. But at the same time, I love the music. So I'm very conflicted about it. It's really great. I absolutely loved it. I will be coming back to it. I have repeatedly listened to it over the last month. I'll talk more about how it compares to the others later on, but on this list. But it was great. It was really great.
Okay, Matt, what did you think of it?
I feel like that was a really nice parting gift for Fran. I don't know how serious you were, but
Slade Radiohead is perfect for him with his tattoo on his arm.
It's not upset me in any way, shape, or form because it was the weirdest thing I've ever heard anyone say. It made no sense.
You sounded pretty irate.
It literally didn't make even a little bit of sense.
Oh, brilliant! I'm glad I achieved that goal,
but it's fine.
I suggested we listen to this album. Even though we generally steer clear of posthumous releases, because it's hard to make a criticism of someone who's recently died. But I think that this was warranted for us to dive into because it isn't something we've really touched on. I think the closest we came is Burna Boy because that had some Afrobeat elements to it. But I think this has so much more going on for me. I think, as Nick alluded to, musically it's super interesting. His drumming styles, it's very cool.
Cooler than Radiohead, isn't it? I mean, fucking hell.
Well, the thing with Radiohead is, if you want to do this,
I've just pulled you off on a tangent. I successfully pulled you off on a tangent.
Yeah, Radiohead, there's a very specific tone to Radiohead songs, right? And so this is implemented in a very specific way. But I was really impressed with how and this is down to my naivety around this genre. There's a huge amounts of variation within the way this Afrobeat was implemented. There was at times it was just a pure celebration. Sometimes it was very aggressive. Other times it was very spaced out and foreboding.
Well done for pulling it back to some kind of sane response, by the way, for my comment, man.
It's just
excellent work.
Can we switch Nick off for a little bit? Is there a way to turn Nick's voice off for a little bit?
Yeah.
There is no end to Nick talking bollocks. Sorry, carry on.
What it reminds me of is when we listen to Everything Is Recorded, because that had a central figure with a rotating group of people that came in to help flesh out the projects, but with that single tone that was consistent throughout. But I think because of Tony Allen has such a strong thumbprint and strong style, it's much more consistent throughout. Because that was one of the criticisms we leveled at Everything Is Recorded, is the cohesion throughout the album wasn't entirely there.
Yeah, this kicks that album's arse. This is way better than Everything Is Recorded. No comparison.
I'm still on the I think that Everything Is Recorded. They're different. They're different, but I get a lot of the similar feelings. I think the only criticism most of the features are super good. I was expecting a lot from some of the big name features like Danny Brown and Skepta, and wasn't as impressed by them. But that is not. I like the other features. This standouts to me were Na Ito, or Sampa the Great was obviously great because she's always great. Koreatown Oddity I also thought was fantastic. So it was the ones I hadn't heard of which impressed me more generally. I also thought it was a really nice touch to have that quote from Tony at the end. It was very quick. Sometimes when you have spoken word or a quote in a album, it's a bit much. It can go on for minutes, but this was 20 to 30 seconds, and it was just him talking about his philosophy for that and just got it in a nutshell. And so I thought that was a really nice way to just finish it off as well.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, also thought about Everything's Recorded while we were listening to it, and I thought about a few other albums that we've done, and it just made me think. We listen to quite a lot of these types of albums now, like the collaborative albums, lots of features, and a lot of the time I find them quite difficult to talk about on the podcast. I think there's kind of a limit to what you can say with an album that's got loads of features and stuff, because it feels more like I'm not saying particularly this one, but I'm saying in general those albums feel more like a collection of songs than a cohesive album. I think before the only one that didn't to me was the Everything Is Recorded one. And I was also a bit concerned when you told me that Alan was a long-time Gorillaz collaborator, because they make this kind of album. They make collaborative albums, and they make terrible music for people who don't like music. So I was a bit worried about that. But this album,
he's more of a Damon Albarn collaborator.
Okay, that doesn't improve my view on that.
I didn't think that would help.
But this album is great right from the start, and Sampa the Great shows up on pretty much every collaborative album that there is these days. She's just on every album, and she pretty much always owns it, and she pretty much always is one of the standouts. And Stumbling Down is the track that she's on, is the proper opener of this, and it's great. I also loved a lot of the other songs. I loved Crushed Grapes. I loved Mau Mau. I loved Cosmosis with what's his name, Skepta. I loved Deer in the Headlights, the one with Danny Brown, which I thought was great. Particularly my favourite was Rich Black with Koreatown Oddity. That was my favourite track on there. And I think what is particularly impressive about this album is that it does feel very cohesive. It's kind of interesting with the Afrobeat thing, because we're showing up our ignorance. I don't really know Afrobeat music. This album to me just felt like a hip-hop album, and I'm saying it had a very cohesive sound. I think it felt like a very cohesive hip-hop album with what I would say felt like additions of other influences, which I'm assuming some of that comes from Afrobeat. But maybe all Afrobeat music sounds like this, and I just don't know anything about it. But it felt like a hip-hop album.
I think it goes beyond that. Honestly, I think it is good by that standard. But this is the point I was suggesting, was that lots of other bands who do interesting things percussively are also lifting from potentially this genre, or even potentially this artist. The drummer and percussion is absolutely key, and is incredibly impressive. And I suppose it feels like hip hop with a band, a bit like maybe some of the Odyssey stuff that we've talked about in the past. It does make a difference to have the live musicians with it, and that certainly did stand out. But it did feel very hip hop to me. I felt, despite there being loads of different artists, loads of different collaborators, I did feel it all worked together. It was a much more sort of complete piece of work than I thought it would. And just to take it back to what you were saying about us not really covering posthumous albums a lot, I think that is because, I don't want to have to say anything negative about somebody who's just passed away, and we've sort of shied away from some albums in the past, and I think that's been the right decision. But I am really glad we covered this, because obviously neither of us had the need to say anything negative, because it's just a very good album. So
yeah,
it really is stellar. It's one of the best things I've heard this year, I would say. I love it.
Nice. I think it's worth. I definitely going to try and listen to some of the founding albums of the genre, because he was obviously core to that 40, 50 years ago, and that might answer your question of
until you said that you were choosing him. I'd never even heard of him, but again, that's my ignorance of the genre.
How embarrassing for you, Frank. Deary me.
Yeah, I only know him because he drummed with Damon Albarn. It's not really for the good, the bad, and the Queen.
Yeah, that's a bit of a shame. But we won't hold that against him, because this album's very good. Okay, so next question, Matthew Paul. Which album title felt least relevant to the music, and why?
So I'm going to go with Bright Green Field by Squid. And the reason I'm going for this is I think it's the obvious one to pick, because everything else is pretty much directly related. Every other album name is directly related to the album, I think. Okay, and this at least has a metaphor in the way. Yeah. I can think that maybe this is related to like there's some dystopia in this album. The first track. I think the first track's GSK.
First proper track, yeah.
Yeah, and so it has this idea of the grass is greener on the other side kind of feel to it. And because of that, like every other album name, which we'll see, pretty much directly links and is hugely relevant. So this was pretty an easy choice for me. And so, yeah, listening to the album, I spent pretty much the entire time comparing it to Dry Cleaning, because we covered that last month. Yeah. I think they're both like enshrined in what is considered post-punk these days, for better or worse. And despite that they might come under this umbrella, they're hugely different in style. I think they're the opposite ends of what that genre can be. And the reason like they're so different, really, I think though the voice is less unique and interesting in this, it's still delivering deadpan lines occasionally, but it has urgency at other times. Sometimes he's screaming, sometimes he's cares. And then the same is happening with the music. And it's like up and it's down. It's giving space to breathe. But then other times they're just going hell for leather. It's just so much more variety of the instrumentation and everything else going on in the music. It still feels like it's centered on the kind of plucky bass lines and angular guitar, but there's so many other elements coming into it. For me, it just felt like, still compared to Dry Cleaning felt very much within themselves. They were trying really hard to be like cool and to be edgy, and these guys were the ones. These are the ones people you actually want to hang out with, because they're there brazenly rushing in. They're having fun. They're full pace. They don't feel out of control, but they're just about to get to that point. And so for me, like this album, within rock, the only album I've really clicked with, that I'm sure I've clicked with, is Shame and maybe Black Midi. And they're approaching, starting to think about like album of the year category. Like they're in the conversation for me. Okay. I'm not sure if this has made it all the way there, but this has actually made me think about that, which is the first time I thought about a rock album in that way for a couple months, which is cool.
Cool. Okay. Is that you? Yeah, I'll jump in. So yes, I'm totally in love with this album, and the band now. Like I've been totally obsessed with this album since we started listening to it. It's the opposite effect. I've got Dry Cleaning in my notes as well. James, our fellow editor who loves Dry Cleaning, will be loving that we managed to slag off Dry Cleaning in the second episode, because I think we upset him last time. But this had almost the opposite effect to Dry Cleaning in the last episode on me, in terms of I was excited for Dry Cleaning. I really expected to love it, and I was just really sort of disappointed. Whereas with Squid, I'd heard some of the stuff previously, and I thought, it's okay, I'm not going to love this album, but I want to give it a listen. And just, it was one of those completely instant albums for me. I totally loved it from listen one. And sometimes, as I've said before, when I love something on listen one, it does grow tired for me. But this has just grown and grown as time's progressed, really. I personally think it stands above a lot of its contemporaries in the sort of post-punk, post-rock movement at the minute. I think I love that Shame album as well. But I think this is better than the Shame album, because it's more varied. It's got more about it, I think. I love the Shame album, but this is just something a bit more special, I think. I think there will be people who listen to this album and dismiss it as just more shouty man music, but there is so much more nuance to it than that. I also think there's, early listens, I think his voice can sound very derivative of the Talking Heads, but I think, I think the more time you spend with it, the less that matters. I also think across the album, you'll hear influences from all over the place. I think the song 2010, there's Radiohead influences there. Radiohead are coming up a lot today. There's David Bowie influences on some of the songs, but then they just really feel really unique and dynamic as a band. I think they're all such talented musicians that even though they're clearly part of this big current movement of music, they feel like they're really doing their own thing in a way that not many this year have. Like, there was disappointments with Dry Cleaning, with Black Country New Road. I feel like these are really doing something special. And I don't know if you've watched many of the videos. If you haven't, then do. Like I went down a total rabbit hole with their videos because they're fascinating as well. They're really well done. They really work well with the music as well. And yeah, I think the other sign of how much I like this album is just how often my favourite song has changed over the course of the month. So I started out loving Documentary Filmmaker, and then it was 2010, then it was Global Groove, then it was Narrator, then it was Paddling. But at the minute, I'd say it's Boy Racers, which when I first heard Boy Racers, I was like, well, this is a bit of a silly song. But it just grew on me and grew on me. And I think they are silly in some respects. There's some really silly lyrics in there. But there's also some real darkness in there. And I think you were saying this, Mike, it's just very, very varied and just very interesting. But I think they're a really fun band. Like, a lot of the time bands aren't fun. They just want to be serious or they want to be cool. But this is a fun band. They're very energetic, very involving. But I think they also have quite a lot to say with their music as well. So I think, it's... On the podcast, it's been a very long while since an album has blown me away as much as this one. Wow. I'm struggling to think of the last one that did. I love it.
Wow. Okay.
So now Nick's going to slag it off.
It's funny that you say about the videos thing because I got a message from my brother, previous participant in this podcast, Lewis, saying that he's working with the director of the video, one of their videos, to make a video for his band.
Wow, because their videos are fantastic.
Yeah, so
that is really cool.
I haven't actually had a chance to see yet, but the video itself. But he said, check it out because the guy's really good. He said, so yeah.
Yeah,
so
they make incredible videos.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, great. Really good. So
well, he's obviously going to be huge then. Exciting. Yeah. So don't forget me, Lewis. Don't forget me. I will say though that overall I'm far less impressed than the two of you with this album. There were bits of it that I really liked. I think my high point was Peel Street. It's probably my favourite song on the album.
It's great.
I think it had it showed it had a lot of energy and it had a lot of fun to it. And I think the album is, I think you're right to say, it has got that silliness to it a little bit, and I think that's. That's a good thing in lots of ways. It gives it some kind of lightness, which is great. I think the problem I had though was that there were several bands one of which Black Midi that was mentioned earlier, that I think could do something similar to this band but better. And I'll raise another one which I guarantee at least Fran will not agree with, which is that I think they sound like Daughters a little bit occasionally. The talking,
not the Daughters I've heard, but
talking mode. So Boy Racer in particular, I thought was sounding like a bit of Daughters, but I have to say like a kind of slightly watered down version of a Daughters song. And Peel Street, although I do really like it, sounds like a bit of a watered down Black Midi song. So although I like the fun of it, I like the energy behind it, I can't say I was riveted by it, and I can't say I would choose it over some of those other bands. So it's one of those ones which happens periodically for all of us, I guess, where you hear a band and it makes you think they sound like X other band. I would rather go and listen to that, So, so sadly, wasn't totally in love with it. I didn't hate it, but I'm not. It's not in my top albums of the year kind of category in any way. So, it was fine. It was okay.
So with Black Midi, just to go back to Black Midi, I find I love Black Midi, but sometimes they are a little inaccessible. And so
that's fair.
I can't stand them.
That's fair. I know Fran hates them.
Yeah. So I feel like these guys take some of the elements of Black Midi, which are fun, interesting, and like rambunctious almost, just like causing chaos.
No, I totally agree. I agree with everything you say, except that for me, that taking that and lifting it into something more digestible is, I would invert that and say watered down. Because to me, that's a watered-down version of what Black Midi tries to do.
Well, I would say that's a taste thing, though, isn't it? It's totally a taste thing, because it's like with Daughters and Black Midi. For me, what they're doing is taking something too far and creating a noise that just isn't. It's not palatable to me. I can't listen to it, especially Daughters. Black Midi, I haven't listened to the new album yet, and I will give it a go. But
it's great.
It's taken it too far. Whereas I think for me, maybe my level of what I enjoy, bands like Squid and Shame are doing some of that, but they're having fun with it as well. So I feel like Black Midi and Daughters, bands like that, they're very posy. They're very like, look how amazing we are. I want a band to have fun as well, and I feel like Black Midi are just very up their own arses.
In a weird way, I think we're actually all agreeing about what how these three bands that we're referring to all fit together. It's just a question of the fact that I think it's a compromise to do what Squid have done versus the other two bands, and you think it's a more sort of reasonable level to take, and a more sort of balanced position to take. So, it's amazing to say we're totally in agreement, even though we're also totally in disagreement.
In agreement while disagreeing.
Yeah.
What an amazing achievement.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to have to argue with the word compromise, though. I don't think it's a band doing what they want to do. They're not compromising anything. They're doing the sound that they want to make, and you are now sounding like a pretentious member of Black Midi, saying that they're compromising.
That'd be amazing. Well, no, I would love to be a pretentious member of Black Midi. Only problem is they're like 15, so yeah.
You speak like
I was going to say.
Yeah, exactly. I knew you were going to get there. I went there before you, so fuck off.
Old Uncle Nick in the corner.
You could be their dads. You could be their dads. You could make sandwiches and tidy up after them.
I wouldn't even be able to stand for the length of the concert, probably. They would dance around on stage and stuff. Yeah, their drummer in particular is amazing. Black Midi. Oh my god.
Well, that's the other fascinating thing I wanted to talk about with Squid before we do move on, is that the drummer's the lead vocalist as well, which I've not really seen.
Oh.
And
really?
I find that kind of fascinating. Yeah. Again, you see it in the videos, but watch some live sets as well.
So difficult to do anything really genuinely creative with that.
I mean, I've seen it, but to see someone perform in the way that he does while playing the drums as well as he does is
maybe
kind of fascinating.
I'll make you listen to Blood Red Shoes at some point.
I've heard them before.
Yeah, I feel like you've made me listen to them before and it didn't go that well.
Okay, well then
try again.
Then he's going Hell for Leather, and he's also Death from Above. Drummer sings.
Oh yeah. I love that band. Yeah,
I don't really know them either. So there you go. I've just missed out on these people who do it, but I like seeing
We've
it
done an album on the podcast.
Death from Above. We have. Yeah.
Oh,
Basically,
it was shite, wasn't it?
Yeah, no. Well, that was a much weaker album than the one they done before it, but it was still way better. The one that just a bugbear, Royal Blood, that I see on every single. I don't know how big their sponsor marketing budget is, but they are everywhere with the fucking advertising Royal Blood. They are. I'll just put on record a very shit version of Death from Above. It just drives me insane that everyone talks about them all the time like they're somehow innovative.
How many bands are we going to slag off today?
It's just off the charts, isn't it? We began with Radiohead and went down from there.
So I went to.
I hate the Red Hot Chili Peppers, by the way.
A waste of shit.
I didn't go to school with Royal Blood, but they went to the school next to me. So I used to see him all the time play with my friends' bands.
Right.
Back in the day when you just played keyboard.
They're ripping something off. Sorry.
Listen, as the host of this podcast, I'm going to bring us back. We need to get on because it needs to stay to a relatively normal size. So
I'm here today to make Fran's job difficult. I'm here to make Fran's job difficult today as his last one. I'm trying to derail the podcast.
Stop talking about people that you've met at some point, or someone that you saw at school, or a band whose drummer you like less than another drummer. And let's get back to the albums we're talking about. So, Nick.
Boring.
After he leaves, it's going to go all over the place, isn't it?
From Porter Robinson, McKinley Dixon, and the classic Minnie Riperton, Nick, which was your favourite? Tell us about it.
Hold on a second. I guess probably... it's really hard. I guess McKinley Dixon. I'll go with McKinley Dixon. So to minimise the dead air. This album was kind of reminiscent for me of Odyssey in lots of ways, and I enjoyed it on a lot of levels for that reason. I thought it was very, very well produced, and from what I could see just from a quick search from my extremely minimal research as usual from Spotify and stuff, was that it seems like it's not a huge name. Is that fair to say? Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think this album has got quite a bit of. Apparently it's the third one of a trilogy, but this album has kind of made a bit of a name for him.
Okay.
So we'll see if he gets bigger, but he's not a big name at the minute now.
Right, yeah. So to me, to produce an album of this much, this high quality, production-wise, when he's not a big star, is very good, very impressive. So yeah, I mean, on the technical side of things, I think his flow was great and very tight, and the album had a lot of sort of great instrumentation. It had a little hint of Kendrick in his tone sometimes, I felt like. I would say, though, I don't know that I will be coming back to it a huge amount, just because, again, a little bit like I said earlier, the Odyssey is better, but does something very similar. So I'm having this problem where I'm listening to things that are sort of reminiscent of other stuff and driving me back to them. So, but no, I mean, I think it was definitely. I'm glad I heard it, and I think it's an achievement. And I'll be watching for future releases from him. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Cool. Matt.
Yeah, I actually agree a lot. It like as an album, I was pretty shocked that when I looked at the numbers on Spotify, and it was between 5 and 10,000.
Exactly.
And I'm just like, I've listened to this album like 20 to 30 times at this point. That's like 1/500th of all the listens.
Exactly. just podcast editors have listened to this album for my half its total user base.
Yeah, but based on that, I was also blown away by how complete it was. I think we talked already a lot about variation and variety and getting that balance between variety and cohesiveness. And I think he already figured that out. There's a lot going on in this album, but it doesn't get stale, and it doesn't feel like it's falling apart at the seams either. I really like the live instrumentation, the way it breaks down. When it combines in the early songs with like his voice specifically, and then also the group vocals and the way the group vocals come in with all his backing singers and stuff, it reminded me of some NERD tracks, just without like the huge, massive poppy hooks. Not
a name I've heard in a long time.
Yeah. I was kind of like, but then it kind of just went more like jazzy influence later on, and I was like, oh, this is the influence of To Pimp a Butterfly now, really coming out. But I think overall I was really like this album, but I think the same as Nick is one I'll keep my eye out for, keep the eye out for the artist as they develop, but maybe not specifically this album, because there are other stuff that I'd maybe turn to instead.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, we've had complaints from fellow editors that we're agreeing too much on this podcast nowadays. So sadly, I'm going to have to agree that it is a very good album. Maybe I like it a little bit more than you. So if that counts as a disagreement,
well, a minute ago we agreed when we disagreed, so we really are fucked, aren't we? Yeah. So.
But I think this album I just think it starts so strongly. I think Chain So Heavy is like such a statement of intent. It just blasts you away. And then I think that it really keeps up the intention in those early songs. I think there's a sort of mix of like intense jazzy style, a quite furious flow at sometimes, and I think quite a controlled chaos throughout the early songs. And I think there's also, you've both mentioned Kendrick, but I think there are hints of a few artists that we've talked about positively on the podcast. I think Bless the Child has a bit of a Saba sound. I think it could certainly be a Saba track. Make a Poet Black, I think, is clearly Kendrick influenced, but I don't think it's derivative. I just think it's influenced. But then I think this album really sort of sets itself apart for me with the song Protective Styles around halfway through. It's a really sort of soulful, gentle song with a really good string section. It's the one with the chorus of "Pardon my black ass, but my sisters need therapy." I just think it's like a really real moment of honesty in the album, and it's like all the fury and the intent in those first few songs.
Can I just interject though and say that song is that's the one where there's a lot of repetition of that line, it goes on for like 10 minutes like that, which I think.
But I think it really works, and I think that's
beautiful melody and a good sentiment.
I think the way that song works in the album for me is it starts like such a furious album, and then that song's that moment of like, oh, it's all a bit too heavy, and it's a sort of it lowers the tone a little bit and sort of makes you think a little bit more. And I think this is where it reminds me of an album that I love and you two have been sort of middling on, but it reminds me of the Kano album a little bit, The Hoodies All Summer. I think the song Suck Your Mum on that album is the song that really sort of shows some of the truth behind the bravado, and I think that's what Protective Styles does here. And I think for me, once I got my head around that song in particular, it made the album as a whole much more interesting to me. And then I think songs like later on we've got Brown Shoulders, which is a sort of strong anti-Trump song, but also feels like a real moment of sort of solidarity. It reminded me a bit of Kendrick again with the song All Right and how that song became so important to like the Black Lives Matter movement. It feels like that kind of message again. And yeah, I know I keep comparing him to other people, and I think those comparisons and influences are quite obvious. But I do think he marks himself out as his own artist on this album. I think it ends so strongly with the like jazzy, meandering Mama's Home, which has a panpipe solo, which is just fascinating. And then the final song, Twist My Hair, which is just gorgeous, sinister song that kind of feels like you're in a dingy club somewhere. I think it's a really fascinating, intriguing album. I think it's politically powerful, but it's also really sort of personal and honest. And I didn't think of the Odyssey comparison. That was one person I didn't compare him to. But in terms of his storytelling, I can see that as well. So yeah, I was really impressed. Which I'm saying a lot today, but I was really impressed. So yeah,
okay,
good stuff. So we have
Why don't
two
you pick
albums
one
left.
then, Fran? Why don't you go with one of the others?
Okay. I mean, I'll talk about Porter Robinson, who every time I've tried to write or say his name, I've called him Peter, but I'm going to call him Porter now.
Well done.
I'm going to say that I'll talk about this one because I'm not going to say an awful lot about it. I think despite quite a lot of listens to it, it's one of those albums I don't feel massively qualified to speak about. I think it seems to be part of a genre that is very popular right now, and a genre that I can't really get an entry point into. This to me felt like a 100 Gex album, but with the idiocy taken out, and the idiocy's been replaced by sentimentality. It's very sentimental. It's like 100 Gex have woken up with a sad hangover and made this album on the spot. They've had too many beers the night before and just want to get some emotion out. So that's how it felt to me. But I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people.
Guess that's what it's like. You never actually had that happen to you though, Fran, have you? So you've no idea what that really feels like. Yeah. Exactly.
Sad hangover? No, I don't know what that's like. But yeah, I can imagine there's people who probably find it very emotionally involving and moving, and maybe it is, but it just felt a little bit plastic and fake to me. I didn't think it was terrible though. It was listenable. There was bits that were interesting. It wasn't as bad as the 100 Gex album in any way, shape or form. But that's really all I have to say. I don't have a lot of insight into this one. I found it a bit hard to pin down. I also think it's probably quite clear that I liked a lot of the music on this playlist. I feel like this album probably suffered from being on this playlist for me because I always just wanted to get to Squid, McKinley Dixon, or Tony Allen. So it suffered in that way. So yeah, who wants to go next?
I can go. So
next.
for me, this album was really, really strange, and I found a long time sort of trying to work out what on earth it was trying to be, because on one hand it seemed to have a few really, I thought, I know what you mean about the sentimentality, but really beautiful and kind of deft, like piano ballad interludes, like the opener, Lifelike, and then there's a mid-album, there's a really nice song, which is I found quite touching. Obviously, I'm an old softie these days, called Wind Tempos, which I liked.
Oh.
Yeah, isn't that sweet? But the meat of the album turned away sharply from those tracks into an incredibly irritating, and I'll say the word chirpy, which I know we've kind of worn out lately, cheese pop, that sounded like it came from a corporate training promotional video, like in the background when they're just saying, we can go do this, let's go do some more sales this quarter, people. It was that kind of music, which really, really pissed me off, So that was Look at the Sky was a good example of that. Musician was a real example of that as well. So it was kind of like, when I say it didn't know what it wanted to be, I think in a way it did know what it wanted to be. It wanted to be what I think is the shite version of the album, but it was just sort of concealing that in some of the more delicate, thought out piano pieces of the album. So, but the shite like completely marred the quality of what was left, and I definitely won't be going back. So yeah, not a fan.
Okay, no.
This kind of album's really in my wheelhouse, so I really liked it.
I said chirpy, so I knew it would be.
Yeah,
seriously.
You loved it, really? That's amazing.
I don't think I loved it, but it was. We'll talk about the playlist as a whole later, but I think this added a nice balance to the playlist.
Have you not been to a corporate away day when you're work where you have to watch a load of promotional videos? That's what it is.
No, we don't
exactly. If you'd been forced to go through that kind of shit, like day-long conferences where they just show you videos that make you feel better about yourself and the company,
I mean, I hadn't thought about this, but when we used to work together, Nick, the videos I used to make, like
you're the culprit. You're the fucking culprit.
And this was the kind of music you'd have in the back because it's like you want music that doesn't distract from what the person's saying, and kind of puts a bit of emotional spin on what they're saying. Yeah.
I'm going to say some nice things about it. Okay.
We'll let you eventually. So, we're finished. Yeah.
There were at times it did remind me of some late noughties indie bands like Passion Pit and Temper Trap, and so that was what initially drew me in. And then there was some of the more like beautiful.
Sorry, I had to laugh at Temper Trap. The idea of Temper Trap drew you in.
Well, yeah, like more Passion Pit than Temper Trap, but.
Okay. Sorry, Matt. I'm just being abusive for no reason.
Matt's really having a tough time with this one. This is not fair on Matt, really. You know what? I don't give a shit.
I haven't listened to anything like that in a while, and so it was like a nice novelty. But then it's like I listened to more of it. Like it sounded actually much more like the like piano-driven electronic music, like Baths. I don't know if you guys have listened to them.
No.
And they're really, really good. And some of it's like super beautiful, and that combined with like it's very positive, both lyrically and musically. It is a very feel-good album. I'm not sure it's going to be an album that like you're going to dig into an issue with, or it's going to really change how you're feeling. But for me, it's like perfect, like vacation music, right? You're going on a drive somewhere. It's the summer, and this you can put on, and everyone's going to be fine with it, right? Nice simple hooks. It's very escapist.
You can put it in the back of a video for toothpaste.
Yeah.
I've never been more jealous of your career choices, Matt, than that you've not had to sit through shit that has this kind of music in it, because you should not be saying that. That's mental. How could this be a summer holiday music? This is the kind of you're forced to listen to in some sweaty conference room in a conference centre somewhere.
Someone played
in Slough.
Someone played this in the car while I was in the car with them on the way to holiday. I would open the door at one point, not because I hated it, but because it's that kind of music that would do my head in so much.
Good riddance. I wouldn't want you on that holiday.
Matt's not taking a holiday anymore, Fran. You're on your own.
We've not even let it get to the end of a sentence, have we, to be fair, so sorry, Matt.
I think again, I think every album we've talked about has the right balance of diversity and cohesiveness. I think another element of this is the vocoder vocals. I think fits with the aesthetic pretty well, which is something we've leveled criticism at artists before. And I know there's other reasons why you probably don't like this. Like one of the songs that you picked out, Nick, Musician, like that is hugely influenced by anime. It's basically an anime intro song, and I'm guessing you don't watch much anime.
I have a lot now.
So you're probably not into it as much. No. Yeah, and there's other like video game elements hidden out throughout. Like there's a Ocarina of Time sample in one of the songs.
That's very interesting, actually. That genuinely is a different direction of thinking for this. Yeah. In other words, you're not talking as much shit as you were a minute ago. That's a good point.
Yeah. And I think I googled to try and figure out if it was for sure a sample, and I saw a live show, and there was like all kinds of like mixing of different video game soundtracks in. He has all this kind of imagery associated with video games and anime. So I think it's a whole vibe that he aesthetically
all you're
chooses.
doing is proving that it's not a genre that I can get into, aren't you?
Yeah,
I like video games, but it's just the whole idea of that is when I was saying, I feel like it is quite a young genre, and it's a genre for.
Well, it's kind of like the intersection. It's kind of like the intersection of anime and David Brent, basically.
You're both
those things put together.
Yeah, I mean, it's not for me. It's 100% not for me.
I'm young and I'm cool with the kids.
Vibrant, of course.
You're really young, okay.
But yeah.
Is that?
I think people should at least give it a go.
Matt was actually like, "Are you done? Are you done? Come on!"
Are you done now?
But he barely got the chance to speak, and now he's going to finish the sentence. He's like, "Are you fucking done, Matt? Come on, let's move on now. It was shit."
Yeah, let's move on to. Do you want me to talk about Minnie Riperton?
Yeah, Matt. Maybe you'll let me talk about.
We're going to give you a minute of silence now. No reaction, Fran. Yeah.
No talking.
You got a minute. Go.
Minnie Riperton, Perfect Angel. This month's classic. Go.
So to start with, her voice is ridiculous, right? Like it's obviously we often cover classics, and we're like, obviously this vocalist is amazing, which she is, but I didn't need to hear her go quite so high quite so often. Like I get that that's a hugely impressive skill, and it's a novelty on which she's almost sold on, so you need to deliver that for the people that like the range or whatever. But it did feel almost like a party trick, and you see your best friend do the party trick. every single time you go to a party with them, and you're like, that's not fun anymore. But apart from that, I really liked the general tone of the album. I think it had a very relaxed vibe. It was very loose. It felt like everyone's just hanging out in the backyard, having a good time. There's a barbecue on. I have a lot of summer vibes at the moment, as you can probably tell. At times it was a little bit too cheesy, like Perfect Angel, the title track, crosses that line. And for me, that like the tone doesn't work if it goes too cheesy. I think for like that kind of song that's so sentimental, you have to really, really nail it. And I think like there's a reason like Lovin' You became so big, because she it's still a bit much for me, but she pretty much threads that needle of it's very cheesy, sentimental, but it is also so pretty and catchy that it can have it can get beyond that. But overall, I'm not really. It was really interesting to listen to. I'm not going to dig back into this because it doesn't feel like my vibe at all. But I'm glad I know who she is and what this is all about now. Yeah.
I found it was getting really difficult to not interject. I gave you over a minute there just to mention, but it was so hard not to jump in there, Matt, and try and throw a spanner in the works. So you can thank me for that. I
well
guess.
done. Well done.
Okay. Fran, do you want me to go?
It was weird.
Yeah, you go, Nick. You go.
Yeah, it was weird for Matt to talk without being interrupted.
I know. Yeah. I was really struggling as well. I'm not gonna lie. The fact that I'm struggling to start talking again now because I had to hold back so much that so now I can't talk. So true, you go, Nick.
So it was really funny with this album because, and this is another testament to my musical abilities and skills here. I was listening to this playlist a lot on headphones, walking around or whatever, not looking at the actual playlist. And for ages, I didn't make the connection that this was actually the classic from the 70s. I just thought it was a very, very clever homage to that period.
Okay. Yeah.
Which shows how observant I am. I couldn't remember. I didn't even think about that. I just thought I was learning albums, listen to this. And just shows how observant I am, and also, how some things don't change in some areas of music production, because I think there is actually some bands now or some musicians now who would love to be like this, and work very, very hard to be like this. So, but it was just hilarious when I realized, oh wow, this is actually as old as it sounds like it is. Weird, but yeah, no, it really seemed to me to exemplify the heyday of that 70s soul, really, really, immaculately. Obviously, I understand she worked with Stevie Wonder a bit, which is the perfect matchup. It was very sunny and joyous, and in general, I like that. In general, I could get on board with that. The song, although even the title is difficult for me, but it's so nice. It's just too nice, just too nice. That is. But no, I actually did like that song, and I did find it kind of a nice summery kind of experience. The caveat is, and I think it's something that Matt mentioned, is the skill of being able to sing in the whistle octave, like Mariah, is not a benefit to the music at all. It's generally really just grating, and this is not. I don't know. This is even allowing for the fact that Mariah is, did my most hated song of all time. And uses which is All I Want for Christmas Is You.
Don't get him talking about
Don't get me started on this one. I'm sure
before.
you'll be here all day. But it's bad. And that whistle octave stuff drives me insane immediately because I can associate it with Mariah. So to be fair, on Minnie Riperton, she was long before that and didn't have a connection. So, but I couldn't help it. So I found it really difficult to listen to that side of the stuff. And I just felt generally like there are points where it was just. I mean, when we say grating, sometimes the music is grating in this way or that way. This genuinely was, occasionally actually painful on the ear. Like that note was like, Jesus, it's just too much, So that was the only thing. But otherwise, I thought it was a well-produced, very joyous, summery album, which exemplified exactly what I think it should have done, or it was sort of about. So I enjoyed it.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Generally, I really enjoyed listening to this album. Really glad that I chose it. It's interesting. My next point is kind of Nick's touched on it here, and I kind of thought you would both tell me I was totally wrong, but Nick's pretty much said the exact same thing. So I think it didn't feel dated in the way that a lot of the classics that we do. Some songs did, but in general it didn't. It felt kind of accessible and enjoyable, and yeah, while some things dated it a little bit, it did also feel like there are a lot of bands doing a similar thing today and returning to that sort of 70s soul sound. I think songs particularly like Reasons and Take a Little Trip, the ones that are less cheesy, would fit quite nicely on a lot of albums that are being released these days, you know, the soulful end of pop music. So I think, yeah, I totally agree with that point. I think, yeah, obviously Loving You is the big, well-known track here. I'd say it's probably better known as a song than Minnie Riperton is as an artist. I think there's probably loads of people who know that song and haven't got a clue who Minnie Riperton is. So it's not really been a song that's gelled with me in the past. But in the context of the album, I did like it, and I do think this is the interesting part again, is that I think it shows off a ridiculous vocal range. It is a ridiculous vocal range, and I was really interested to know if everyone could get on board with a voice that is... It has moments when it's so high that I think only dogs can hear it. But
yeah,
I was kind of okay with that. I kind of enjoyed... It's, you know, I think, put it in context again... yes, it's maybe a little bit of a gimmick, but it's probably something that marked her out and that wasn't done much. And then we have seen a lot of people with these vocal ranges that just overuse things, whereas I think it's a little bit overused, but I don't agree that it's so overused that it damages the album, really.
It's in every song.
But I'm okay with that. It didn't put me off. I think it's...
You're a Mariah fan as well, Fran?
No, I can't stand Mariah, but this is nothing like Mariah in any way, shape, or form, is it? At all. So yeah, generally it was a success for me. It was nice to listen to a classic that kind of. We talked about it with some albums, how maybe it's a precursor to metal, or maybe it's this, or maybe it's that. And I generally don't give a shit about that a lot of the time, but this did put a context on a genre for me, and I still can see the influence of this album and albums like this today. Yeah, it's not one I'm going to rush out and buy, but I can definitely see why it deserves, you know, the status of a classic. So I was impressed. I've said that a lot today.
Yeah, yeah.
I was impressed.
Should we talk about the playlist as a whole then?
Yeah, that was it.
That,
yeah,
yes.
just the playlist to go. Yeah.
Who wants to go on, Matt?
So, Fran, you were impressed.
I was.
That's all
I'm
a
say.
That's one word. Yeah, impressed.
Yeah, I was impressed. Matt, you tell us what you thought.
Yeah, I just talked about Minnie Riperton. It wasn't my favourite classic. There were some good elements, but apart from that, I mostly loved to sometimes just liking pretty much everything else. I think every other album I will either listen to a lot or listen to again. And follow the artist. So yeah, pretty good, pretty strong playlist this month.
I would say this was definitely stronger than average, better than average over the last 42 we've done, with the exception of the Porter Robinson, which was a disaster. The rest of it was, you know, either good or excellent. So yeah. On,
Why did you suggest Porter Robinson?
You're just going to interrupt me. I can't believe it.
Yeah,
man, that's so wrong.
I'm getting my revenge.
I'm trying to speak here. Fucking hell, man.
For a nitpick, I was just like, this doesn't make any sense.
Can I make a guess at why you picked it? Can I guess?
Yeah.
Because I feel that Nick is obsessed with Needle Drop, and every time Needle Drop reviews an album, Nick picks it. And Needle Drop reviewed this album very positively, and I think that's the only reason Nick picked it. And I hope that teaches him not to always listen to what Needle Drop says.
Well, I'll first say, even if I do watch Needle Drop a lot, which I do, I don't agree with everything he says. But anyway, that's a digression. The main thing is, you're dead right, Fran. Yes, that's why I picked Needle Drop. But that doesn't mean I agree with everything Needle Drop says. I just listen to what he says and I have opinions about it. And in this case, he liked it, and I'm telling you, I think it's shit. So there you go.
Yeah. See, I thought your son might have picked it.
Oh wow!
or be listening to it.
No. Colum's got better taste in music.
Yeah, my son's an Arctic fan, really. Pretty much nothing else.
I mean, I thought the playlist was... I'll start with Porter Robinson, because I do genuinely think if it had been on a different playlist, I might have had a bit more time for it. It just was not even close to any of the other albums in terms of quality, whereas this playlist had a contender for my album of the year with Bright Green Field, and one of my favourite hip-hop albums I've heard this year with the McKinley Dixon, and just Tony Allen, which was fascinating, and I enjoyed the classic. So it's one of the better playlists I remember, without a doubt, really. It's been a long time since there was... I didn't hate the Porter Robinson. It's been a long time since there's been nothing nothing I hated, and there have been 3 albums that I probably will end up buying. So it's definitely a strong playlist for me, yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Good
Wow.
note.
Nice one to finish on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to talk to us about the other?
Yes,
Yeah,
so it's John Smith time. So I'll tell you why I love John Smith. Just a pre-warning, there might be a couple of personal details and me talking about times in my life that weren't great during this, so let's go for it.
So what if we
nice
hate
cheery
it?
way to end.
Exactly. What if we hate this guy and
Well,
now
there
I
you
feel
go.
terrible? Oh no!
I know. I'm going to have to stop you from doing that, aren't I? But yeah, okay.
I'm going to have
so
to
John
rewrite all
Smith.
my notes.
Yeah, exactly. Give us 10 minutes.
But
We'll
yeah,
right back.
In all honesty, I kind of can't talk about why I love John Smith's music without spending a bit of time talking about how I discovered his music and the role it's played in my life. So I chose to speak about him on this particular episode for a reason. It felt pretty apt to talk about him when I'm about to go off on some paternity leave from the podcast for a few months, because there is a good chance that if it wasn't for John Smith, this baby would not be happening. I say that because there's a pretty good chance Kirsten, my partner, wouldn't have even gone on a second date with me if it wasn't for the fact that I had a bribe of some John Smith tickets to see his show at a church in Chorlton. So we'd had a very good first date, but for reasons that I won't go into in too much detail now, there were a few sort of complicated factors that meant Kirsten wasn't sure whether, to have a second date. I'm pretty sure she was going to let me down gently, and then I messaged her saying, do you want to come and see John Smith? I've got some tickets. And I think she thought, fuck it, free gig. And then here we are 7 years later with a baby on the way. So, yeah. And John's music kind of played a role in our relationship before we got together too, because we met online. We met on Plenty of Fish, the very classy dating website, which I'm sure you're all aware of. It's lovely. And the thing we talked about most really was music. She introduced me to Agnes and Bell and Johnny Flynn. I told her about John Smith and the Tallest Man on Earth, although she now claims that she knew Tallest Man on Earth before and was always a fan, which is bollocks. But yeah, what I didn't tell Kirsten about at the time, and I'm not sure I have really to this day, is how I discovered John's music. And that's kind of another thing I have to be thankful to John for, really, I suppose. I mean, yeah, so like I said, it might be a little tiny bit bleak for a second, but you all know it ends well, so it's all good. I was going through a pretty rough period in the years before I met Kirsten. Uni hadn't finished that long. I'd come out of a relationship. I was working in a job I didn't really like, and pretty much all my friends, Matt, had moved away from Manchester. So I was kind of alone in Manchester.
You're working a job with me as well. Is that the other part? That was
No,
really...
it was before I met you.
Oh, okay, thank God for that. I'm not responsible for that part of it anyway.
So you weren't there at that point either. So a lot of my Saturday nights at that point was spent alone in my flat, and I developed this little routine where I would get a bottle of red wine, sit in with a book, I'd put an artist I liked on Spotify, and then I'd sit there afterwards going for a bit of a rabbit hole. With Spotify, it has the you like this artist, so you might like this artist.
Yeah.
So I would just play random people, sit there, have some more wine, get a bit more maudlin, read a bit more of my book, and I discovered quite a lot of artists I love through doing that. So as much as Spotify has got a lot of shitty things about it, that is one thing that Spotify's been really good for me. I discovered Lisa Hannigan, Angel Olsen, but none really have had as big an impact on me as discovering John Smith. I haven't got a fucking clue which artist led me to him, like who I was listening to that said I would also like John Smith, but as soon as I heard him, I was sort of totally bowled away. He only had 2 albums out at this point, so only the first 6 songs of this playlist the playlist that I put together for you guys would have been out at that point. But after discovering him on one of those depressing Saturday nights, I must have listened to those 2 albums just again and again in the coming weeks, and they were a really sort of positive thing for me. Music was a really positive thing for me at that point, as it always is, but it was a really big thing at that point. And I think at that point I was actually... I was always a big music fan, I was always a music geek, but I think that time where music was so important to me made me even more of a music nerd than I am. And I think John Smith played a pretty big big role in that. So yeah, that's kind of how I discovered him. That's kind of a lot of the details of why I do love him. But really, just to talk about his music more specifically for a little while, it was the things I spotted on that first night of hearing him that have really kept me hooked through all the years and all the albums. I think his voice is just exceptional. It's one of my favourite voices in music. I can't think of many singers who have the range and ability he has. And I love how he kind of can go from gravel tones to honey tones and then just singing a single word. He's just ridiculously talented. He's also a ridiculously talented guitarist. I think I knew this straight away, but actually when I first saw him live, that really hit home. The song Winter, which is on this playlist, is kind of the biggest example of that. I don't know if you'll remember the song particularly, but he plays that song by, he has the guitar face up on his lap and he's finger picking at the same time as using the guitar as a drum. And he does that on quite a lot of his songs. So quite a lot of his percussion is actually him playing the guitar at the same time as finger picking, which is just, I've seen it. Cool. I've seen people do it, but it's amazing to watch him do it. And I also really love his ability to mix the traditions of folk music with something that's much more current. So if you listen to the song Axe Mountain, which I think I started the playlist with, it's a murder ballad, which is a folk trait. Folk music has always had murder ballads within it, but he brings that up to date. And there's a song, Hairs on the Mountain, towards the end of the playlist, which is off an album I only included one song from because that album was entirely covers of old folk standards, and Hairs on the Mountain is one of those. But what I love about that particular song is how it has that very old folk elements, but it's updated into his personal style. And yeah, seeing him live, I've seen him live every time I get the chance to go and see him live, because he's just, what you hear on record, I suppose, is, I love it, but I think seeing him live sort of does take it to the next level, because he's such an incredible performer. His voice usually it's a small room because he's not a very big artist, and I know we've been covering a lot of big artists in these Why I Love sections, so it's quite nice to cover someone who's not massive. But so I usually see him in a very small room, and his voice just totally dominates, and watching him play guitar in that way is incredible. But I'm just really interested to hear what you two think, and I know I've just given you some stories about my life that you might not want to then go, oh, he's shit, but I know he's probably one of the folkiest artists I've brought to you guys. And I'm not really sure if it would be your thing, if you'd have any interest in him, and if you don't, well, fuck you. But it's also fine. But yeah, I do feel that in some ways, the playlist I put together as I was listening to his releases have got sort of steadier and more straightforward over the years. He's probably got, differently to a lot of artists that we always talk about, he's got less experimental in some ways. And I wonder how that might come across to people who haven't listened to him before. So I'm interested in what you thought of the chronological order, but mostly, first of all, I'd just love to know what you thought of the playlist, what you think of him in general, and yeah, who wants to
Who do you want to go, Fran? You get to pick.
Let's go to Matt.
Okay. So yeah, I not obviously, I think he's a really, really good folk musician. I did really like his conversational storytelling. As you mentioned, his voice is kind of crazy. I liked it most when he was really pushing it, when it gets really gravelly and stretched. Because I think the way he plays guitar also, it sounds very textured as well.
Yeah.
And so the way they mesh together is just, it's really, really cool. And really, the whole sound is so rich and dense, even though it's obviously very minimal what he's doing. And so, yeah, for me, that works best when he's impassioned or when there's some more going on. So you mentioned the experimental side. And so the earlier stuff was really what I was most interested in.
I thought it probably
as it kind of gets more gentle and slow. I'm super predictable when it comes to folk music. I want them to be folk rock, or I want them to be experimental folk.
And more chirpy.
Yeah. Well, in this case, it didn't have to be chirpy, just more less whispery. But I definitely enjoyed it a lot. I think one of the things I noticed, which I thought was really, really cool, how much I gripe about fade outs. I haven't really talked about them in a while.
chance to talk about fade
He's
out.
been in therapy for a while. He's managed to relax his stress about this issue.
Well, he has a fade out into Have So Many, and it's done really, really well. It's an example of doing it properly because he has this really nice cyclical guitar riff, and he's repeating this line, "Who knows where our love will go," and it's like a theme throughout the song, and then it gradually starts to fade out, which I think fits with the tone of the song. But again, still like a straight fade is still pretty lazy. But instead, as the main part of the song fades out, like the guitar and the voice, there's like some electronic organs noises come up, and like replace the humanness.
So it's not a fade out
with
then.
Just well, he replaces it with something very visceral.
Yeah, that's probably my favourite
and
song by him, by the way. Just while you're talking about it, that's my favourite song by him.
I didn't feel enough pressure. Matt, Fran's favourite song you're talking about right now. Relax, though.
It's obviously.
Say what you feel.
It's a very good song. But no, I hadn't heard a fade out used in that way, and I thought it was very creative and a really cool way to end the song because it turned from him having this repeated mantra, and then it became something much more visceral, which I think matches this, this notion of who knows where our love will go, right? It became something that was more than he could maybe communicate with just his words.
That's really interesting to hear, because obviously, like saying that is my favourite song by him, and I've never thought about that. So it's quite nice hearing someone talk about like an element of a song that you've known for a long time, but that they've sort of noticed and you haven't. So thank you, Matt. I'm going to go and listen to that.
Next time, you should
Yeah, I will.
But it's really good.
Listen more attentively next time. Yeah, focus, Fran. Come on.
I do think he needs to change his name. Because being called John Smith is ridiculous.
Yeah, I do feel for him in that respect. It's very difficult.
I'm surprised he didn't pick a pseudonym, but it's super cool.
Yeah. There's also a rapper called John Smith. So when I first discovered him that night I was talking about, then the next day searching for him on Spotify, and it's the first album that came up, I just pressed play, and it's some terrible hip hop. And then obviously the beer always comes up, so it's not easy to find him on Google sometimes. But yeah.
Okay, shall I go?
Go for it, mate.
So I'm going to digress slightly and just say, Fran, you really are a bastard. You really are a bastard because you can't begin a playlist description with two, I won't go with heartbreaking, but quite moving tales about the loneliness and pain of your past life. And then tell us about this fucking band, and then ask me my honest opinion of it. That is bullshit.
Yeah, I'm totally up for honest opinion. I've got the minute, but I had to tell you the context.
We'll fucking see if you're up for honest opinion.
That's the whole point of this section.
So, I was thinking like how best to sort of commemorate the moment when you break from the podcast and all the sort of dubious opinions you've had over the several years. And how I'll sort of miss the opportunity to rip into your kind of absurd points of view about, clipping, Coral Chris, Idols, Mount Erie, etc., etc., etc.
Correct.
And then you gave me a sort of gift in this because I'm going to take a final swipe at you before you leave and say, although I did like this playlist in general, it really didn't move me. It really gives the weight of context, which is what's so interesting in a way, to make a serious point for a second, because without any of that context, this felt very like straight down the line folk, which was in lots of ways beautiful, but rarely gripping for me. So in a sense, although I listened to it, quite a few times, and at no point was I like, oh, get me out of this. It was fine. Nor were there any points where I was like, oh my god, this has just blown me away. So I mean that's kind of a short response really. So I suppose sorry. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry.
No, I mean it's exactly the response that I expected from you, really. It was as I was putting it together, as I was choosing to cover John Smith.
And that's probably why you went to like twist the emotional knife, innit? With all this shit about you with a bottle of wine on your own on Saturday night.
Because it's exactly the responses from both of you, really, that I kind of imagined. I mean, for me, it is. I do understand that response as well, though, Nick. I do kind of get it. I think it's not really your genre.
You get the point about you being emotionally manipulative? Is that what you mean? You get that as well?
Totally. That's my stock in trade. But I think he isn't straight down the line. He is a sort of front runner of the genre, and he is sort of doing things that other people don't do. But I also do. They were the kind of criticisms I imagined coming from you, and it's I do get them. But yeah, it's it wouldn't be you if you didn't end by being a dick, would it? So
yeah.
So you say it gets simpler over time.
Yeah.
Is there a lot of material that's like more experimental and interesting?
I'd say the first 2-3 albums are more sort of, he's doing more different things with his music.
Is there any that's like more like FKA Twigs sort of style?
No, thankfully. But yeah, the first 2, particularly 3 albums, they are, and then he sort of settled into a groove, which I even personally don't know how I feel about it sometimes. In terms of, I love every album he puts out, and actually the album he's put out this year, which the name has just escaped me, The Fray it's called, is one of my favourite albums by him. I think it's a very accomplished album, but it's sort of become like he has settled into what he does now. There's a couple of songs on the newer one, and I included one of them, where he has sort of put a bit more of an experimental twist to his guitar tone and to what he's doing with his guitar. But he has settled into a path. I do think, Matt, for you probably want to listen to the first couple of albums if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah.
But when he plays live, he does do that a bit.
We saw him play live, didn't we? Fran?
I don't think I saw
Wasn't
him
he playing support at somewhere we went to?
Yeah, no, you might be right.
Together playing support at Albert Hall.
We did. Who was he supporting?
I can't remember.
No. You went to see him, and he was supporting Gomez, and I told you to go and see him. I wasn't with you.
You're right.
I wasn't with you. I remember the conversation.
You're right.
Yeah, he's friends with the guys from Gomez, and he does actually because one of Gomez is from Matlock, where I grew up, and John Smith does the occasional gig in one of the pubs back in Matlock.
I will qualify this by saying that if you're into folk, this is excellent folk. I think this is really nails it. If this is the genre you want, and you're within that sort of framework, then go for it. But that's to me a slightly boxed off position.
And I think what I've noticed with you is some of the folk music I've introduced you to that you have enjoyed does tend to be a little bit more surreal
weird
type, Aldous Harding, stuff like that, stuff that's got a little bit of an oddity to it, whereas John Smith doesn't have that. He does have it on occasion, but he doesn't have it in general. But yeah.
Right.
Cool. Okay.
And with that, Fran is no longer part of this podcast.
No.
I mean,
go and have a baby. Fuck off.
Keep talking about a break. Possibly I'll be back the episode after. No, there'll be 2, won't there, before the Mercury one? But I don't know. I might be here for the Mercury one. I might not. It depends if the baby lets me.
Depends if I let you on the call as well. I mean, I'm going to debate that, honestly. We'll see. But
next time, Sam, who has been here several times already, is going to take my place. So Sam has chosen...
Mercury correspondent.
He is. And usually album of the year as well, right?
Yeah.
Or not? Yeah. I don't know.
Yep.
I don't know. I may have made that up. But so Sam is going to pick one recent release, and that is Marina with Ancient Dreams in a Modern Land, which is a terrible title. He's going to pick the classic, which is Stevie Nicks with The Wild Heart, which is a terrible title. And his Why I Love will be Janelle Monáe. I'm sure they're great albums, Sam, but they're bad titles. And I've picked one because my way of staying involved is to pick albums that will piss them all off. Actually, I think the album that I've picked, I already know it, is The American Negro by Adrian Young. It is a fascinating album. I think it's a challenging one to speak about, which is why I've chosen it for them.
Thank you so much.
It is.
Yeah.
And I picked Rostam with Change Phobia.
Can I just ask, was Rostam in the Maccabees?
Rostam was part of Vampire Weekend.
Okay, I knew it was somebody.
And I picked Gruff Rhys, who was part of Super Animals, in Seeking New Gods.
Which is a terrible title.
It's not some bad as some of the other ones you mentioned, but yeah.
Yeah, a Change of Phobia isn't great.
Terrible titles. Terrible.
I think this month was good on all fronts.
Yeah, titles were great. I love the title For My Mama and Anyone Who Looked Like Her. That is a great title.
Yeah.
Which is why I went with title questions. But anyway. Right, guys. I shall see you in a few months.
Yeah. Maybe we should actually, the three of us should speak again, not just on the podcast, but actually keep in touch, maybe. Do you think?
Yeah.
Or should I just cut you off now?
No.
Is this it?
I mean, I wouldn't know how to have a conversation with you without interrupting you and telling you you're wrong. So.
Fair enough. Okay, well, I'm sure the massive audience all wishes you well with your new baby.
Thank you, audience.
Right.
Bye.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Good luck.
What is it?
What was that?